answers. People are keeping secrets.
An elusive predator haunts the Oregon coast roads at night, taking teenage girls for the last ride of their lives.
Bright ribbon marks the area on a steep, newly clear-cut hillside where the teenagers' remains were discovered.
2 dead females, one stacked on top of the other one.
But a killer who hunts on the highways could strike anywhere.
The moment you are away from that body, anyone that's between you and that body becomes a suspect before you are.
And he could kill again. I'm M. William Phelps, investigative journalist, and I have an obsession. Serial killer, cold cases.
Now, nearly 10 years later, investigators say they still need the public's help.
For me, it's personal. My sister-in-law was murdered, and her killer has never been caught. These killers are still out there. Their victims deserve justice. And just one new clue could make all the difference. I don't have a badge, but I do have something the cops don't have. Someone who understands the dark mind of a murderer.
As I started killing again and again, I saw it as a purpose.
Because he is one. I'm heading north on Highway 101, tracing the western shoreline of America. Couple hundred miles north of the California-Oregon border, and I'm in picturesque Lincoln County, the unlikely setting for a multiple murder mystery that has stumped local detectives for over 25 years. You know, I'm looking around here, and the mountains on one side, coastline on the other. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's the last place you'd expect someone to come along and just take out 5 girls as if they didn't matter. But that's exactly what happens. "17-year-old Kelly Disney is the first victim. Last seen walking east on Highway 20 around 1 a.m. on March 9th, 1984. Only her skull has ever been found. 8 years later, in May '92, 17-year-old Melissa Sanders and 19-year-old Sheila Swanson make a call from a roadside payphone and are never heard from again. Their decomposed remains are found 5 months later. Then, January 1995, 15-year-old Jennifer Essen and 16-year-old Kara Lees walk out on a stormy night and into the hands of a killer. Both are strangled, their bodies found 2.5 weeks later. The similarity between victims, their ages, and where they were last seen makes me think these 5 murders are the work of one killer. But other than that, there's almost nothing to work with. 5 girls, teenagers, just disappeared. I'm driving into Newport now, the seat of Lincoln County. I hear this is a tourist town. When the economy was better, RVs just bumper to bumper all along the coastal highway. Now all they have really is the fishermen, the loggers, and the locals. I'm about to meet the man who's got all 5 of these cases weighing on his shoulders. Lincoln County District Attorney, Rob Bovett. He doesn't like crime in his town, least of all, unsolved murders. So in 2009, he reopened the files on this mystery. Tell me about this area, this community.
Well, we're a fairly small, rural community in the central Oregon coast. It's about the most beautiful place on earth. Just a great place to live and raise family and to be.
Back in the 80s, the 90s, Was hitchhiking uncommon?
No, not uncommon at all. What was uncommon is for people to disappear. So, you know, the community took note, and law enforcement took note when these girls disappeared, even before their bodies were found. This was unusual.
When we talk about murder in Newport, in this area, are we talking about one a month, one every 2 months?
Well, once a year, maybe. So a double homicide, and we had 2 of these back in the early 90s, was unheard of. I mean, it was just incredibly rare.
Why did these cases go cold?
Well, I think for a lot of reasons. Some of the leads fizzled out. Some of the things that the investigators were working on didn't develop into sufficient evidence to actually charge anyone with a crime. Unfortunately, that happens in some criminal investigations where they just run out of things to do. People are not talking.
So why did you reopen these cases?
Sometimes people change. They age. They're willing to say things today that they weren't willing to say even 10 years ago. And it's time for the secrets and the barriers to come down.
What do you feel this killer is like? Someone who takes the life of young girls. What is this person?
You know, I'm just a simple country lawyer, and I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, so I can't even pretend to get into the mind of someone who would commit such heinous crimes. I can't pretend to understand it.
I gotta be honest. I've been writing about killers for over 20 years, and I still don't understand them either. And all the degrees in the world won't help criminal profiler John Kelly know what it's like to take a life.
How can you really understand and get into the mind of a serial killer unless you converse with the serial killer?
Kelly said it. The only way to get that kind of insight is straight from the source. That's why we consult with a monster the United States government keeps in a cage. He's an incarcerated multiple murderer we've codenamed Raven. Let's see what he has to say about the coastal killer. Okay, Raven, why is he choosing these girls?
I think they see them as an accessible source for enjoyment. This is an opportunity murder. We weigh an opportunity. We see the person walking down the street and it's dark. We know that the line of sight is only going to be a few yards. That chance meeting sees the victim, and then he has to decide whether he wants to take the victim or not.
So what makes him go ahead?
There's circumstances that provide that allows me the opportunity to murder to get away with it. And that enticement is sometimes enough just to murder.
Yeah, but I know how to get away with murder, but I'm not going to go out and do it. What's the difference between me and you?
Never murdered anyone. So you don't. You have to step across that line and realize what you can and cannot do.
After months of talking to Raven, I should have seen that one coming. In his mind, you haven't lived until you've killed. It's a twisted way of looking at the world. But hey, that's why we're using him.
I like that he's not saying to us, the guy drives a van, he's 35 to 45. I like that he's just speaking from practical experience that only a killer can give. And he talks about it as if he's talking about, oh, we painted this house the other day. There's no emotion there at all.
The most important thing is to listen. Let them talk. Keep them talking. The
Oh, he's
more they
talking.
talk, the more they reveal. And then you pick up on the different insights that their distorted psyche looks at, believes, and acts out on.
When Raven goes back and he describes these feelings, is he describing what the coastal killer felt?
Yeah, I believe he and the coastal killer are feeling the same thing.
So we are basically speaking to the coastal killer when we speak to Raven.
I can't go into detail, All I'll say is, Raven's murders aren't so different to these coastal killings. And you know what? Raven got away with murder for a long time, until one mistake finally tripped him up. Sooner or later, the same thing's gonna happen to the coastal killer.
Now authorities can get on with their investigation into a host of unsolved murders of young women which have plagued coastal counties over the past few years.
An unknown killer has evaded Oregon authorities for over 25 years, and he could still be out there.
See, this is very hard. What you have here is a profiler's nightmare.
The odds are stacked against us in this case. We've got no hard evidence to work with, only similarities.
It looks like this guy has a particular victim of choice in mind.
Teenage girls, vulnerable, walking by the road at night.
They're easy targets because they're in a dark highway that time of night trying to get out of the elements.
Raven thinks this killer's an opportunist. Someone who doesn't plan, but just cruises the highways and strikes when the chance presents itself. Kelly agrees.
He has a certain age in mind that's in this murderous fantasy of his, and he's willing to drive. He's willing to look. He's willing to take a chance, even if there's two, to fulfill that fantasy.
Kelly's made an interesting point. If this is an opportunistic killer, it seems he's getting more brazen as he goes. The first victim, Kelly Disney, was alone. But victims 2 and 3, Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson, and 4 and 5, Jennifer Essen and Kara Lees, were in pairs. Taking 2 at once? That's bold. Remember, they followed one of the golden rules. Walk in pairs, go together. We always tell our kids that. Travel with a friend. You can take care of each other. It didn't work this time. You know, you also have to ask yourself, was this guy stalking these girls? Was he following them? Did he know they were there? Or did he just happen upon them? Or does he drive by this phone booth every day? And he's familiar with it. And that one time he did drive by, boom, he sees the 2 girls. And that's when he strikes. When there's an opportunity. I'm heading to Portland to meet the father of one of those girls who followed the rules. But she was punished anyway.
She's probably 12 or 13 there. She was 15 and a half when she was murdered.
Floyd Essen's daughter, Jennifer, was killed in 1995 along with her friend, Kara Lees. Tell me about Jenny.
She liked reading, playing guitar, hanging out with her girlfriends, stuff like that. It's typical teenager, I guess.
On January 27th, it's dark and stormy out. But inside, it's comfortable and warm. The girls are at Jenny's boyfriend's house, doing what 15-year-olds do, hanging out, just being teenagers. It's times like these we look back on when we're older. But Jenny and Kara won't get to do that. After midnight, they decide to head to Jenny's brother's house.
Her older brother said, well, you give me a call, I'll come over and get you, give you a ride home.
Maybe it's the recklessness of youth, a bad decision, or just bad luck. But they walk instead. Ahead of them, 3 lonely miles, about an hour on foot of unlit highway.
Jenny was terribly bright, but sharp and naive, too. And she just couldn't believe anybody would want to hurt her. And I think probably more or less led to her downfall.
So I'm right here on the coastal highway, walking in the footsteps of these girls. You know, out here at night, and all these girls were swiped at night, you may not see a car for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. But you know what? When that car comes around the corner and the headlights hit you and it slows down and you're freezing and you're shaking and you need a ride, boy, that heat coming from the heater inside that car, that's gonna feel good. And you're gonna take the ride. So these girls are naive. Of course they are. They're 15 and 16. But should they have to pay for their naivety with their lives? You know, two girls walking along the coastal highway, and Satan stops and picks them up. They never thought that was going to happen. Why would they?
The girls' remains were found merely by chance. A couple of contract loggers cutting trees at this remote site found the girls' bodies.
Nearly 20 years later, Douglas fir trees once again cover the hillside where Jenny and Kara were found, concealing any traces of the horror that occurred here.
They'd just been asked to thin some trees.
Right. But retired investigator Steve Hebner can't forget.
They were about through when they saw what they believed to be that body.
After loggers discover the bodies, Hebner is the first law enforcement officer on the scene, 2.5 weeks after the girls went missing. So you get that call to go out to the scene. Tell me what you see.
Well, I followed them up there, and I had a pair of binoculars with me, and I scanned that brush pile. And when I did,
can you see it?
I saw a human hand in the brush. I didn't go any closer. And I knew immediately I was in a crime scene. Forensic folks came out of Portland to process the scene, and what we ultimately found when they removed the brush is 2 dead females, one stacked on top of the other one, underneath the brush pile.
So they were stacked?
Stacked. One was laid out right over the top of the other one.
Were they naked? Were they clothed?
They were clothed. The one girl, pants, her jeans were unbuttoned, just the top button. And I believe the zipper was about halfway down. But other than that, they were fully clothed.
Ultimately, what did they determine as the cause of death for these girls?
Asphyxiation by strangulation. The first thing we were thinking, and the first thing I think naturally to think in this situation, here we've got 2 teenage girls that have been murdered. Was this a sexual assault? Went bad? There was no physical evidence that would support that there was any sexual assault occurred to either one of these girls.
But the killer did leave his mark in other ways. There was some evidence that told you one of the girls was a fighter.
Yes. Jennifer. She had bruises and contusions from striking somebody with her fists. So she fought, and there's absolutely no doubt that that occurred.
What does a case like this do to a guy like you?
You build a barrier. That's the first thing you do to try to protect yourself, because if you lose control, you can't function. But I got to tell you, as we stand here right now, I can see the faces very clearly of those 2 girls when they were uncovered, lying on the ground, one on top of the other. I have had that picture in my head for a very long time.
The Lee's case is the best chance cops have of linking physical evidence to the coastal killer for 2 reasons. 1, their bodies were in good condition when they were found. And 2, because Jenny fought for her life.
It looks like this girl was real tough. She was a scrapper. She was fighting him off, and I'm hoping that there is some DNA in her defense wounds.
Hebner couldn't confirm if forensics retained viable DNA of Jenny's attacker. But if they do, the technology has come a long way since 1995. And the sample could be checked against a database of offenders nationwide, even in other countries.
Do you think he's done this maybe in another state, Washington, California, maybe even Canada? Do you think he's gone up to the north?
I believe that this is just one of his trolling routes, okay? Like, for instance, if you were out
I'm with you there.
trying to hunt game, you'd be looking for deer paths, you'd be looking for various areas where game travels.
You wouldn't stay in the same wooded
You
area.
wouldn't stay in the same area, you move around.
8 years separate the first murder of Kelly Disney and the second and third of Sanders and Swanson. Then another 3 years before victims 4 and 5, Lees and Essen. If this killer does hunt in other states, it could explain the long gaps.
There's times at night I would be thinking about what she went through. Because it takes, what, 3-4 minutes to strangle somebody. I can't help but think what she's going through her mind when she's being strangled.
Floyd Essen ponders his daughter Jenny's last moments in the cold, merciless hands of the coastal killer.
Shut up! Shut up!
Jennifer Essen fought because she had bruises here. But if you have 2 victims and one of them fought, what's the other one doing?
This is where it gets scary. One is kept in a car while the other's taken into the woods. Hey, listen, I'm not gonna hurt you. I promised you. If you do what I tell you to do, I will not hurt you. So I want you to stay in the car here. I'm just going into the woods with your friend. We're gonna have some sex, and I'm gonna take you both home. Now he comes out of the woods, but he doesn't come out of the woods with their friend. Why? Because he strangled her. So now this girl knows what her fate's gonna be. So as soon as he opens the door to get in with her, she starts to defend herself violently. He gets the better of her during the attack, and he strangles her.
It's only a hypothetical scenario, but it would explain why there's no sign of sexual assault. If the promise of sex is just a ruse, or what if, for this killer, strangulation is the sex act? That's not a question I can answer, but maybe Raven can help me understand.
You know all about strangling. Tell me what it's like.
Well, it's like you want that feeling, that grip, that when the tighter you grab around that neck, the more strength that muscle in the neck pushes back. They fight for their life. It's almost undescribable. You have to experience it to know exactly what it's like. Feel the drain of the body. You feel the relaxation of the muscles. You feel the body give up. It's that release.
Is it a release for you, too?
In a way, yes, because I felt good.
I tell you what, hearing this kind of stuff doesn't get any easier.
It kills me sometimes. It really does. You know what I'm saying.
Of course I know what you're saying.
13.
I've done it so many times.
I thought I had an idea, but not until I started doing it myself did I really know the emotional toll that it takes.
If the coastal killer is anything like Raven, he may well be getting sexual pleasure from strangling. Mixing sex and violence is common in serial killers. Take the roadside strangler, Michael B. Ross, who strangled 8 young women between 1981 and 1984.
My biggest thrill sexually is from thoughts of actually strangling a woman.
Ross was so tormented by his urges, he asked to be castrated. He even supported his own death sentence.
I used them, I degraded them for my own personal pleasure. It had to end.
Like the coastal killer, Ross targeted young females walking on the road. So how do these predators get their victims in the car in the first place?
He's got to be a good talker. He's got to come across authentic and charming, because they're not going to get in the car with somebody they think is angry or acting in a very abnormal way. So he gets them into his car by either saying, hey, come on, it's bad out here, let me give you a ride home. That's A.
No thanks. Come on. Hey, you want to get mine?
Number 2, maybe the girls will be solicited by some drugs, maybe some marijuana. Would you like this? Would you like that? When they get into that car with him, they're in his control zone. He probably has the doors jimmied, so you can open the doors from the outside, but you can't open them from the inside when you're in there. And then he's gonna tell them, you just do what I tell you, and everything will be okay, and then I'll give you a ride home, but you must do what I say. If you do what I say, I won't kill you.
This may be what happened to victims 2 and 3, Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson. No one knows for sure. On May 3rd, 1992, the friends are on a camping trip with Melissa's family at Beverly Beach State Park, north of Newport. Around 1 a.m., they make a call from a nearby payphone. Who did they call? Hours later, Melissa's parents wake to find the girls' tent is empty.
These families were out there, and they had no idea what happened to their daughters.
I'm in Portland with local KATU news reporter Tom Jensen, who's been researching these Oregon cold cases since 2009.
I just constantly do research, see if there are unsolved crimes, and I ran across this from some old news stories that we did. And I thought, you know, these could be tied together.
October 10th, 1992. 2 hunters stalk through the woods outside Eddyville, 20 miles east of Newport. It's been 5 months since Melissa and Sheila disappeared. Then, suddenly, there they are.
They were so badly decomposed that they really couldn't tell exactly how they were killed.
With later victims, Jennifer Essen and Carol Lees, Kelly thinks the killer separated the girls to control them more easily, then strangled them. Did he do the same with Sheila and Melissa?
That's what I thought too. They could fight. Could they fight you off? I mean, granted, they're teenage girls. Or was somebody else involved? Was there more than one person involved in these murders? Was it 2 guys?
It's a possibility. 2 killers to get the victims in the car. 2 to control and kill them. 2 to dispose of the bodies. It makes sense, but where's the evidence? It's like Kelly says, there are no safe bets in this case. A profiler's nightmare. Talk to me about any persons of interest that you know.
Recently, I heard from a person connected to the case. He told me that there's something that could tie 4 of these together. The Essen, Lees, Sanders, and Swanson cases. Wouldn't say more, except for it's somebody off the radar, somebody we don't know about.
At last, a lead I can work with. So who is this suspect? And does this mean victim 1, Kelly Disney, isn't connected to the others? I'm hoping my next contact will answer both those questions. I'm in the woods outside Eddyville, east of Newport, Oregon. Not far from here, the bodies of Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson were discovered in October 1992. 5 months after they disappeared. You put a dead girl out here, she's just gonna melt into the peat moss and the leaves and the brush. And time is gonna consume her. And while time consumes the bodies, he's walking away, he's laughing. He's saying to himself, I got away with it. Again. Even so, I want to know why the coastal killer didn't bury his victims, to give himself an even better chance of erasing the evidence. Maybe Raven can shed some light.
He didn't bury his victims. He just threw a few branches over them. I believe that's familiar territory for yourself.
Best thing to do is throw the body to the side and get away from the body. You can't spend that much time around it. The moment you are away from that body, anyone that's between you and that body becomes a suspect before you are. So why bury it? Spend a lot of time over it. There's always a chance that you might drop something that might be discovered later. In one of my cases, I had dropped the body off and I covered her with leaves. Only to look in my pocket, found out that I dropped my flashlight. And I had to uncover the body and find out the flashlight was under my victim. Get it out real quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time in the area where I'm dumping the body.
Based on what Raven's saying, the Kelly Disney case is definitely the odd one out. Melissa and Sheila, Jenny and Kara, their bodies were all found relatively soon after they went missing. But with Kelly, there was no sign of her remains for 10 years, until her skull was discovered. I'm heading back to Newport to meet cold case investigator with the Lincoln County DA's office, Ron Benson. For the last few years, he's been focused on Kelly Disney's murder.
Kelly Disney was a high school student when she disappeared. Consistently, she's described as a person that everybody liked and everybody got along with. She was a good student. She was involved in sports. She was dating a guy who was already graduated.
Walk me through what happened.
Kelly and her boyfriend have an argument, which we found out was a frequent thing, and she gets upset and she leaves.
It's around 1 a.m. when Kelly walks out onto Highway 20. A passing motorist sees her and calls local police. What was the 911 call about?
The vague information we have about that is it was reported as an intoxicated female walking down the middle of the highway.
A sheriff's deputy heads out there.
She says, I'm just going up to my friend's house just up the street. And the deputy goes on his way. But that's really when we lose track of her.
Kelly's disappearance is initially treated as a runaway, until 1 year later, police and family fear the worst. Her x-rays and dental records are circulated to 10 police departments in different states in the hope of matching them to any unidentified remains. But for 10 years, nothing. Until July 23rd, 1994. Just weeks after the DA puts out a new appeal for information, someone calls in a tip.
Two guys were up traveling some back roads outside of Newport. There's an area where a lot of young people partied. There was an old abandoned wrecked car there up in the woods. It had been there for possibly a couple of years. Their story is they stopped and they were messing around with this car and found this skull in the trunk of the car.
The young men report their discovery to the police. But here's the strange part.
We have reliable information that there was kids playing in that car just 2 or 3 days before, and that skull wasn't there.
Does this point to the killer putting it there?
We did play with the idea, does somebody have sense of conscience after that press release and retrieve her skull and put it in a place where somebody could find it? We don't have enough information to say that one way or the other.
Benson and his assistant, Linda Snow, have devoted thousands of hours to these cold cases. Linda retired as lead felony legal assistant with the district attorney's office in 2007. But she still volunteers her time and expertise here every week, and has done for the last 3 years.
What drives you to come in here once a week on your own time and do this?
Well, one, I thought I could help. And two, I'd like to see these cases solved. The families definitely need closure. Whoever did this needs to be punished for it and hopefully never do it again.
Is it an obsession for you? I mean it, in a good way. And maybe that's an asset.
I don't know if you'd call it an obsession, but I am very, very determined that we solve these cases. And I'm not going to give up.
Linda and Ron agree on that much, and a couple more things besides. They say Kelly's murder is not connected to the others, and that they've built a solid picture of what happened. But Benson's keeping his cards close to his vest.
What kind of evidence are you looking at that you can talk about to me?
I can't discuss that.
Have you eliminated the boyfriend totally?
No.
One thing Benson does admit is that Kelly's killer could still be right here in Newport.
So you're saying it's possible I could be walking by a killer on the streets?
For the Kelly Disney case, yes.
If Disney's murder's not connected, that leaves Sanders and Swanson and Lees and Essen. Can Benson elaborate on the new person of interest in those 4 cases that reporter Tom Jensen mentioned?
We were recently contacted by an outside agency who developed a suspect in one of their homicides. That subject had a connection to Oregon and specifically to Newport. So he's an interest to us.
What can you tell me about that for evidence?
And that would be one thing I wouldn't be able to talk about either.
Benson has a solid poker face.
Were the girls,
but I tell you what, from 20 years as a journalist, I know when authorities give you the silent treatment, it means they're close. Real close.
All we have is the similarity. All 5 of these girls were last seen on state highways in Lincoln County in the late 80s and early 90s. And then later turned up as murder victims.
A profiler's nightmare. That's what Kelly called this case at first glance. But now, we know a lot more. We think Kelly Disney's case is separate, a one-off. Her murderer could still be in Newport, but he's no serial killer. That leaves the 2 double homicides, Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson, Kara Lees and Jennifer Essen. For those 4 cases, after nearly 2 decades of dead ends, finally, there's a suspect. The district attorney's office won't say yet who the suspect is. But based on what we've learned about those 4 murders, we've built this profile.
This guy is pretty much focused on younger girls.
He's an opportunity killer who attacks on the spur of the moment.
This kind of guy, I mean, he's into stimulation. Even hunters that just go out in the woods and they're hunting game, why do they do that? Because they get some stimulation out of it.
Sure.
It gets them out of their head. It gets them out of any kind of negative thinking. They're focused on the hunt. The hunt is stimulating. Same thing with this guy, only he's hunting humans. He's hunting young girls.
He is living out the fantasy at this point.
He's living out the fantasy. He's enjoying a high. It's like a central nervous system stimulant.
He's willing to travel to find his victims. Oregon could be just one of his hunting grounds.
This could be some type of serial that travels all around the country. And every now and then, you know, part of his trolling is this area.
He wastes no time burying bodies, just dumps them, then leaves town.
So by the time these girls are found, and the cops do their little canvas, and they start questioning people, he's long gone.
He's put miles between him and those victims.
And the worst part, we think he's still out there.
I'm not sure where he is, but wherever he is, he's trolling for his next victim of opportunity.
It's a solid profile, but does it match the person of interest? And there's another question still nagging at me. What really drives this guy to kill in the first place? Kelly thinks it's a release of pent-up anger and frustration. But I want to see what Raven thinks.
I'm gonna have John Kelly ask you a question now, Raven, if that's okay.
Raven, when this fellow was killing the victim, can you tell me if there's any kind of anger rush?
I had anger in my victim. I was angry over things that probably they weren't concerned with. In other words, I put something on them that they weren't responsible for. And when I strangled them, I was getting back at certain individuals that made my life miserable. And then I took it out kind of like in association with them. I felt good about getting my anger released. It was like a weight off my shoulders.
We've all heard the expression, a senseless waste of life. If the coastal killer is like Raven, then these girls are dying for what? So some twisted psychopath can feel better about himself? I'm back where I started, in Newport, to see if District Attorney Rob Bovett can shed any light on this mysterious suspect.
Is there any new relevant information that you can reveal at this time?
There is new information, but it can't be revealed at this time. I suspect it will be revealed shortly, probably very soon.
Another poker face, but true to his word. September 25th, 2012, the story finally breaks. Not in Oregon, but in Canada.
I'm Inspector Gary Shinkarik, the officer in charge of the BC RCMP Major Crime Special Projects Unit. We are here today to announce a significant development.
The break comes from a British Columbia cold case dubbed the Highway of Tears. Investigators there have matched a killer's DNA to the 1974 murder of a teenage girl.
The DNA match was for a U.S. citizen, Bobby Jack Fowler. Fowler is responsible for the murder of 16-year-old Colleen McMillan.
Just like the Oregon victims, Colleen McMillan was last seen walking on a highway at night. Her remains were found 1 month later off a remote logging road. The MO is a perfect match for the coastal killer. What's more, turns out Bobby Jack Fowler lived in Newport when the coastal murders occurred. He even has priors there.
Bobby Jack Fowler has an extensive criminal history. His last conviction was in Newport, Oregon for a 1995 violent attack.
With all the facts lining up, it's time for the DA to go all in.
Detectives in Lincoln County have reopened 4 unsolved murders after a break in a Canadian cold case linked to this man.
The district attorney's office has named Bobby Jack Fowler a suspect in the 1995 killings of Jennifer Essen and Kara Lease. He's also now a person of interest in the 1992 murders of Sheila Swanson and Melissa Sanders.
Newport authorities are building their case and pursuing renewed DNA testing. If viable samples are available, they now have a suspect to match them to. And the 4 coastal murders could be just the beginning.
Investigators say they're looking at Fowler in at least 3 other cold case murders in Oregon and others out of state. They won't give details, but they say this is a major development.
This is the kind of break cold case investigators dream of. I mean, this is why we do what we do. Fowler? The guy flew under the radar for what, 4 decades? Now he's being looked at for 20+ murders in Arizona, Oregon, North Carolina, hell, even Canada. That's one hot lead for a bunch of cold cases. And I look at our profile and what Raven said, and this Fowler guy, he seems to tick every box, except for one. We thought he was still out there, but Fowler died in 2006. Bobby Jack Fowler can't hurt any more young women now. But until the families of those he may have killed get concrete proof, they'll still feel pain.